Hello, everybody, and welcome to another it's an episode, but another interview with a Washington State CLW endorsed candidate. I am Julie Barrett. This is our 2024 virtual tour series with Washington candidates, and I am joined tonight by candidate for Washington State Senate, Mike Kelly. He is running for the open seat in Legislative District 4, which is Spokane Valley. Like I said, he is a CLW endorsed candidate. We are very proud to endorse Mike. And we are excited to share with you tonight his campaign. The chat is open, so if you have questions for Mike as we go, please drop those in the chat, and I will be pulling those to hand over to Mike. Mike, welcome. I want to thank you for running for this position. As you know, Senator Mike Patton, who's retiring and why this seat is open, is a dear friend to conservative ladies, and he also has endorsed you. And I'm super grateful to you for running. And I would like to just, why did you decide to run for this seat? And what is your vision for what you could bring to the Washington State Legislature as a senator?
Well, thank you, Julie. First, let me thank you and the conservative ladies of Washington for the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you for your endorsement. In the time that I've interacted with your organization, I found everybody very friendly, very dedicated. So I'm excited to be talking to you again. As you alluded, Senator Patton decided to retire, and he reached out to individuals around him to look for a qualified candidate. And I came on his radar. We had several discussions, and we sat down. And after a few of those discussions, he said that if I would agree to run, that he would endorse me for his replacement. He indicated that the reasons that he was supporting me was that I was, one, conservative, two, that he felt I would be strong in sticking to my principles under pressure that I might face in the legislature, and three, that I had the personality and temperament to get along with other legislators and actually be effective and get some things done, as opposed to maybe some other people that are currently my opponents. The reason I accepted his invitation was because I have a strong sense of urgency about the issues that are facing Eastern Washington. As you well know, Olympia spent the last, several years, probably the last 20, if we really go back and look at it, mandating to the people of Washington what it is that they have to do. And that's particularly distasteful for us here in Eastern Washington because, we feel like we have different priorities, different values than maybe the other side of the state. And we would like the ability to determine for ourselves what our policies should be. So when I see that the legislator is mandating what our schools have to teach and include in their curriculum, and when they are telling us that we will not be allowed to have natural gas before long, and when they disregard other things like parental notification and parental rights, I get concerned. And like I said, had a sense of urgency. So I've been paying attention for some time, and this was my opportunity to get in to help make a difference. To answer your question about what I hope to do in the legislature to make a difference or to be effective, I've got several answers for that, but I guess the short version is that I'm going to spend the initial part of my time following up on some of Senator Patton's priorities that he wasn't able to finish. Most of them are non-controversial. They deal with some transportation money for some local projects, and we hope to get those passed. But through that process, I can get acquainted with the other legislators. I can learn who I can work with and who might be a little bit more difficult. I can learn the landscape, of course, and how things operate, along with the coaching from Senator Patton and some other state leaders that I'm working with. And from there, I'm going to move on to some of my top priorities, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to cover before we're done.
I love that you're working so closely with Senator Patton. He's such a solid guy and very principled, and he doesn't waver. And that's very rare in the political realm. You mentioned the natural gas, and I'm sure you're well aware of, and I believe you helped gather signatures for the natural gas initiative. I think it's 2066.
Correct.
A little bit about your thoughts on that. It's just absurd to think that the Democrats would do this. What do you see happening with this? The initiative made it on the ballot. If that's not passed by voters, what is the possibility for legislators like yourself, if you're elected, to come back and protect this legislatively?
Well, first off, let me say I'm very confident that it will pass because just based on the people that we've talked to during, like you said, our efforts to get more signatures for that. Um, I hear a lot of feedback, and most people agree that they've spent 30 years promoting natural gas and giving us incentives to convert, and now they've decided suddenly overnight that that's not something that that should be done anymore. So first, I'm very confident that we won't have to deal with it. However, if it, for some reason that it does fail, it's going to be difficult to probably do and bring anything legislatively because what'll, the fact that the initiative fails is going to be used as evidence, if you will, that the people don't want this thing repealed. Now, that doesn't mean that I still wouldn't work against this, what I consider very bad legislation. As you may know, if your house were to burn down right now and you have natural gas, you would not be allowed to replace that natural gas system. You would have to convert to electric. And so that's the first step in what I see is this, again, these mandates that are forcing us both to limit our choices and to force us into very expensive conversions. And so I would continue to advocate and fight and bring legislation when appropriate if we can get the any traction to push back on this, because I think Washingtonians, and especially the people of the 4th legislative district, should have a choice about how they heat their homes, how they cook their food, how if they have a backup generator in their homes for conditions that when conditions require all those. So it's very important. And we're talking about in many cases possibly life and death. So it would be something I would continue to be passionate about.
Yeah, and I think that you almost have to, right? I think it was, I don't know, what, 25, maybe even 30 years ago when all of the new construction really converted to natural gas. So you have a lot of people in homes that run on natural gas. Their entire, heat and their cooking and everything runs on natural gas. We had an event on Wednesday last week in Woodinville at a brewery, and the owner of the brewery was saying, everything, my whole brewery runs on natural gas. Without it, I'm dead. And I would
Yeah.
imagine that there are many business owners like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you give one example out of many. Now, to be fair, the legislation as it exists now does carve out some exceptions. So I don't think everyone immediately would be required to convert or lose, but it initially allows Puget Sound Energy to not offer any new connections under new construction. But we do know that they will quickly be mandating that conversion. So if you have a home, if you have a building, you go to sell that, I wouldn't be surprised if very soon you would be required to convert that to electricity. And we all know that already between the push for electric vehicles and their desire to tear out dams, we're already looking at an unstable base load grid. And so I don't really know who's behind all this planning, but clearly they're not thinking this through. So the best solution is to pass Initiative 2066 in November so that we can maintain our right to have natural gas as an option for our energy resources.
Absolutely. And praying that happens. And I know there's a big effort to get that passed. And, one of the things I heard when I was in Washington last week from a lot of people was how, even if they're not Republicans or conservatives, they were very much in favor of passing that initiative. So I am, like you, I'm optimistic that will pass in November. So let's talk about some of Senator Patton's policies that he was not able to advance during his time in the legislature. There's one that we asked him to sponsor that I'll ask you about, but I'm curious before I ask you about that particular bill, what are some of the bills that were his priorities that you are wanting to work on when you become a senator?
Well, he's been very passionate about employees stock ownership programs where you have the employees of a company have the ability to to own a good portion of the company, if not outright. So we want to continue to liberalize the rules around that to make that more available. In my experience as a business owner, I've had a number of businesses when the employees are invested in the success of the company through ownership. Obviously they're going to work harder. They're going to be, more conscientious about how they go about their jobs, and they're going to definitely be providing better customer service. So that would be something that I would promote. I know he's also been very interested in transportation. The transportation budget is quite complicated in Washington, and it involves a lot of different things. But what we really want to do is make sure that we get our north-south freeway completed, that we clear up some dangerous intersections out on Trent Avenue and some other locations. So we would continue to pursue that. We also know that Senator Patton's been a great advocate, pro-life advocate. And so I would continue to, in that regard, to be a strong proponent of from conception to death, pro-life. And we call it, we're calling it a culture of life, where not only we're in favor of life in the womb, but we're also in favor of a full and healthy life while you're, during your normal lifespan, and also being opposed to a euthanasia at the end. Because we believe everyone has the right to, we have the right to make choices, but we want to make that's something that we feel like could be easily abused. And so as soon as they make that an option right away, people are trying to mandate, an end of life requirement. And so we're very concerned about that. So a culture of life would be another thing that we continue to be strong on.
Well, I love to hear that, because Senator Patton and I worked very closely on a lot of the right to life issues, and you summed it up so nice, like calling it a culture of life. I love that. That's kind of the first I've heard of it, but it truly is. That's a great way to summarize sort of on the right, our position on life, because as you well know, it's from womb to grave. And what they're trying to do, if you make it out of the womb, with all of this gender affirming stuff and the mental health issues, they're really, I call it an agenda of death. That's just my personal, I just feel like the Democrats have this agenda of death. And one of the things that we've seen in the last few sessions is all of the abortion bills are packaged with gender affirming care. And so it's not like the Republicans can't run away from the abortion issue, because if you run away from that, then you're running away from the gender issues. And so one of the policies that we asked, a bill that we asked Senator Patton to sponsor, which he did with Senator Jim McCune, they co-sponsored a bill called the Given Name Act. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but for everybody that's watching, the Given Name Act would require a school to call a child by their given name unless the parent gave permission for the child to be called something different. Now, this seems like a common sense bill to me. It seems like something that both sides would agree on. But of course, the Democrat LGBTQ caucus has this bill on their list of anti-LGBTQ bills. Since he dropped this bill in 2024, it's now gone. So it would need to be reintroduced. Is this something that you would consider reintroducing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm 100% opposed to mutilation of children. And I don't think that I don't think that schools or any other institution that's publicly funded should be assisting or promoting, a transition of a child, even if it's just by calling them by a different name, unless the parents are notified, involved, and are approved of something like that. As you well know, Jim McCune, I believe, is currently in a difficult race himself. I'm sure that, and one of the reasons is because of his support for these types of issues. But I feel like we need to have other people who will stand up with him and advocate for these types of things, where we make sure that the parents have control. And as you know, this ties into the initiative that got handed up to the legislature back in the last session that was approved. And then the Office of State Public Instruction decided immediately they weren't going to enforce it and notified the school districts. And The obvious reason for that is because there's a lot of kids that are being transitioned or having other inappropriate things happen medically with them at the hands of the schools that they do not want the parents to know about. So that'd be another thing that I would work on, is to make sure that that legislation is enforced and that it is upheld, the will of the people is upheld.
Yeah, and that's a big one right now because, with I'm sure you're well aware of Senate Bill 5599. That was a huge one that got national attention. Allows the state to transition your kid without even notifying the parents. And so I don't know, like, I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't know exactly how the initiative works in conjunction with a bill like Senate Bill 5599, where you've got this protected healthcare. I think they're kind of at odds with each other. And the Democrats were very clear that they are going to, protect the LGBTQ students. And I think, like you said, the will of the people that signed that initiative believe that they will be told what's going on with their children while they're in school, or, if they're getting medical care or counseling or anything like that. And so I feel like we all have, and the Republican legislators have a duty to fight for what the people of Washington State signed on to with that Parents' Bill of Rights, which is full transparency.
Yes, I'm 100% in favor of full transparency. And not only are we fighting for the will of the people, but we're fighting for the children. Because I think anyone with, with a modicum of common sense and appreciation for, spiritual principles would agree that the parents are the final arbiter of what happens with the children, and they can't do that unless they're fully informed. And so I look at the efforts of those people on the other side of the state and from the other party that advocate for this type of legislation, that they're not so much, quote, protecting the kids. I think they're concealing abuse. And I'm sure they're not all. I'm sure they're good people, I guess what I want to say, but they are certainly misguided in this regard. And just as energetic as they are in promoting these, but I would be just as energetic in opposing them, because I find it wholly and completely inappropriate.
Yeah. And, I got an email from one of our members the other day who was dealing with a situation where she had a child that had undergone some testing for a sports injury at Seattle Children's Hospital. And she wasn't able to access the results for that sports injury. And the people that she was talking with, the staff at the hospital that she was talking with, told her, have your daughter go in and set up a chart and get access, and she can get the access that way. Well, kids don't, at 15 years old, kids don't know how to decipher medical results. They don't know how to read these things. They don't know how to, they have to be told to brush their teeth, to take a shower, right? And this is part of the mature minor doctrine. This isn't anything new. And it is something that a lot of the medical hospitals and institutions came up to speed to get into compliance with state law. I think it was in 2021 when they started protecting all these charts. But as a parent, if you've got a child that's in sports and gets injured, you need to have access to their records so that you can help them. So honestly, we have these laws that are harming children. So if we have these Democrats saying that we need these protections for children, but they're actually harming children, whether it's a sports injury or what have you. So I don't know. I'm kind of just ranting a little bit here, but I don't know if you've talked to any other legislators or candidates about some of the ways that we can start to walk back this mature minor doctrine in Washington.
Well, it's going to require people to be vocal about their opposition to this. There are organizations that are out there now trying to put together apps for your phone that would include access to emails from a number of organizations around the state that for people who are concerned with these types of issues. And so the purpose of the app is to make it very easy to communicate with your legislator and to be notified when bills like this may be coming up so that you can express your opinion. The yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that, like as you pointed out, children are minors. I'm sure most of them feel like they're as smart as they're ever going to get when they're 15, 16 years old. But we know through experience that that's not the case. And that's why we allow parents to maintain the supervision and control over their children. And so if they can't vote and they can't own guns and they can't or purchase guns, and they can't do many other things, drink and all these other things, how is it that they can be making decisions without the input of their parents that can affect the rest of their life, these medical decisions? So to me, again, like I said, it's wholly inappropriate to exclude the parents. That's a fundamental premise of a family, and the family is the fundamental building block of the community, and the community is the fundamental block of the state. And so by destroying the family in this way, I mean, they're really tearing at the fabric of our society, in my opinion.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And just one of the comments in our chat, it's not a question, but just says, my teen daughter asks me to schedule her antibiotic. And that's, I'm a mom of 4, and I have a stepson. So, I can say with confidence that these kids are not prepared for the kinds of responsibilities that our state is making them responsible for. They need their parents, and it's just a lot of wasted time to jump through hoops. So I love that you're very supportive of parental rights, and really I see it as the rights for children, because children have a right to the protection of their parents. And taking that away from a child is cruel, honestly. Speaking of,
Absolutely.
what's that?
I would say absolutely. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. So let's talk about your thoughts on education. Education is one of our big issues. And as I'm sure you're well aware of, in Washington State, we've had tens of thousands of families pull their children from public education since the COVID lockdowns in 2020, and taking many school districts up to almost 2 years to reopen. And there's a lot of talk of school choice. There's a lot of different ways to do a school choice. What are your thoughts on kind of education at large? Just kind of where do you see that?
Well, you mentioned school choice. So I mean, we all know well that our schools are underperforming even the national averages. We're about 10% below in proficiency than we were before COVID. So we haven't really recovered. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. One of which is, again, these curriculum mandates that are requiring us to focus on things other than, the core essentials that all people need to learn. But I've been advocating, as I've been knocking on doors and discussing these issues with citizens. I've been advocating for a universal school choice type program being brought to Washington, and getting a discussion around that going. They have an excellent example that works well in Arizona, where money is spent on either a private education or homeschooling. Money's provided to the families for that, and then the balance of that money that's saved still goes to the public schools in order to continue to fund them in a way that's necessary to cover things like the fixed costs that won't change just because they've lost some students. We all know that in Washington, the WEA, the teachers unions, are quite powerful. They fought tooth and nail against every solution that could bring an element of competition to the schools, and so we have charter schools that have struggled, even though we approved it several years ago. So that's another topic that I would be quite passionate about, because just like I believe parents should be in charge of children when it comes to their medical treatment, I also believe that they should have full knowledge and choice when it comes to their education. I mean, I can't think of the two more important things as far as development of a child. And we know the children are our future. That's why I believe that, again, those that are opposed to our policies want to keep control. They want to keep the parents out of it so that they can dictate how kids are raised and what they learn, what they think. But we need to to have a wide variety of educational options available, and the state should recognize the value of that by helping and assisting parents, whether that be a private education or homeschool. Or a public education. So we do not want to destroy public education. But again, I want to bring an element of meaningful competition so that everyone benefits by it.
Is there, I love that answer, because I think, we do need to give families a choice, not being stuck with the failing public education system. However, do you see a route, at least legislatively, to help bring the public education system back into a place where they're actually educating our students rather than indoctrinating them? Is that something that could be, are there steps that the legislature can take to start reining them back in?
Well, undoubtedly there are, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you a whole lot of detail. I know that whatever we attempt to do legislatively will have some opposition. So
Yeah.
this is going to require a multi-pronged approach. So one is through organizations such as yourself to mobilize the concerned parents and the public to start demanding better education and demanding these options. And once that support and vocalness, they become vocal enough where we bring attention to it, then legislatively we can introduce some solutions. And we can do it in a way that's not just speculative, but we can look, like I said, to other models that there are other parts of the United States that have a proven track record and that have evidence of effectiveness, so that we can have serious conversations with the other legislators and say, this is a solution that's worked and this is something that we need. And then thirdly, if we don't get the type of reaction or the type of cooperation that we need, we always have the initiative process. And so then we can really go to the people and the people's voice can be heard. And with that support of the people, then we can bring legislation again and say, look, the people have spoken, they passed this, and so we need to either modify it or strengthen it through the legislative process and get those options and that strong education back to the kids.
Yeah. One of the things that a couple years ago, when, all this stuff was happening with COVID and parents really started seeing firsthand what was going on in the classroom, because these kids brought their Chromebooks home and everything. A lot of parents, myself included, we had 4 kids still in high school at the time, we were thinking, okay, well, let's pull our kids out of the public education system, and then we're pulling the dollars with the kids. And what the legislature did was they funded kind of ghost students, right? So they funded based on pre-COVID numbers, and there was a bipartisan effort to make that happen, which we fought very hard against that bill that would fund those ghost students. And then this year, a bill that to give more funding to public schools. And we understood why, it was almost unanimous, I think, that the bill passed, but to give more funding because of a lot of the utilities for the public school districts have gone through the roof, right? So it's this problem that's been created by the legislature. And so then the legislature has this duty to fix it, right? So they're in this cycle of that. And I'm not necessarily expecting you to have an answer, but I think this continued funding because Washington funds public school students at, I don't know, it's like almost $19,000 per pupil. And they're not delivering to the taxpayers what the success rate, as we've already talked about, is so low. And so that's one of the things I know for conservative ladies that we're very concerned about is we keep funding these failing public schools and we're not giving parents another choice of how to spend their tax dollars.
Yeah, well, it's a frustrating situation. And you kind of alluded to a good part of the problem, which is the legislature creates a problem with their left hand and then tries to solve that problem with the right hand and thereby creates another problem. So the example being when you started out by mentioning the increase in utilities and other things. Well, that's because of legislation and regulation. And so the schools have to spend more money on things like energy and keeping the lights on and the heat going. And then they turn around and demand that we figure out a way to pay for it. So it's unfortunate. Again, if we could bring an element of competition into the schools and give people a choice, that I think that this would go a long way to not only keeping the costs down, but it just greatly improving the quality of the education and the outcomes that we're experiencing. We know that in Seattle, they have a handful of schools that are actually closing because they don't have enough students. So these students are withdrawing. And you also alluded to the fact that they went to a different funding model, which was the kind of pre-COVID numbers rather than actual enrollment. And they did that in Idaho. And now that the legislature's kind of reversed that, or that was the temporary effectiveness implementation of that has ended. Now they're scrambling for money that's nowhere to be found. They're actually going and trying to crowdsource those funds through like GoFundMe. So unfortunately, for whatever reason, the legislature tends to look at short-term solutions for these complex problems rather than long-term solutions. And I know that a lot of it has to do with political expediency, so that legislators can say, hey, look what I've accomplished in the time I was there. But they're just Band-Aids that just create larger and larger problems. And so this is why, at the federal level, we have 35 trillion plus in debt. And here our budget's doubled to over $1 billion a week over the last 10 years. I mean, people are getting priced out of their homes through the property taxes, and our schools are struggling to find the funds that they need. And then on top of that, the legislature throws more mandates on them that are going to require more staff, administrative staff, and then they say, go figure out how to pay for it. So we just need some common sense, simpler solutions. And I know that I can bring those. It's just a being effective, it's going to require just the energy and the tenacity that I expect to have.
Yes. And I just want to sort of set expectations for our audience is that, Washington didn't get here overnight, and turning this ship around is going to take some time. And so please don't expect instant results. Have some patience. It's going to take some time to start moving the Titanic into the other direction. And so I know that if we can get, some common sense legislators like yourself, we can start turning the ship around, but it is going to take time and it is going to take patience. So when we don't get those immediate results, we can't give up and we can't get discouraged. We have to keep supporting our common sense legislators as we move in the right direction. I'm going to switch gears quite a bit on you here. Can we talk a little bit about the Second Amendment and what remains of the Second Amendment in Washington State?
Well, absolutely. So I just met last week with a gun store owner who is concerned about a law that will be taking effect next year, requiring full audio and visual recording of all transactions, or the entire store, really. Everything that goes on inside the store. It's also going to have his guns locked up. You're not going to be able to just come in and just look at something off the shelf. You're going to have to request that access to it. And so he's ready just to pull the plug and shut down. So that's one example of the assault that it's been going on in Washington in the Second Amendment. We know about the magazine bans. We know about some other things. I'm a big Second Amendment proponent. I believe what the Constitution says, both in the state and fed, that we have the right to defend ourselves, the right to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. And so I would be opposed to, like I said, the magazine limitations. I'd be opposed to any tax on ammunition. I'd be opposed to either raising the age for purchase of firearms. And I just want people, again, to have a choice, because the more I see out of government, the more I believe in the original intent, which was for people to be able to defend themselves against a government that has lost its sense of its role for protecting the people and is becoming more of a tyrannical, coming from more of a tyrannical perspective.
Yeah, and there have been so many bills over the last 3 sessions that I've been involved. And it's like they do this sort of 2A whack-a-mole thing in the legislature where they'll have, a dozen different bills in the House and the Senate, and they all get a hearing on the same day, making it next to impossible for citizens to testify and speak out on these bills. And so that's something that there are a number of bills that we're concerned about resurfacing next year. You mentioned the tax on ammunition. That's something that everybody's concerned about. There's also the insurance, the homeowners insurance that would wrap in firearms to that. That's another one that we're concerned about. And so it's really important for citizens to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature, to subscribe to email lists like Conservative Ladies of Washington, get on our Voter Voice platform, our Legislative Action Center, so that you get those updates, so that you know what's coming and you can speak out, whether you're testifying or you're sending an email, or you're just signing in pro or con on a bill. There's so many ways for people to participate, but that's a huge thing. Like, we can't leave our legislators alone to battle this. And fortunately, there's a very vocal 2A community in Washington. So typically on the gun bills, there's a lot of citizens wanting to weigh in and make their voices heard. So I'm sure that we'll have that again next year, and hopefully we can. I think we've done a pretty good job in Washington on holding off some of the 2A stuff. I think they would have, without any resistance, they would have gone for broke, but we've been able to hold them to what they have. But they've still managed to really, make a huge dent in the Second Amendment, and that's unfortunate. So another thing, you have a long to-do list, Mike.
We're facing a lot of problems, but fortunately, I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah. And that is awesome, because we need, I don't know if people understand how difficult it is to be a Republican legislator in Washington. I often tell legislators during session, I'm like, I don't know how you're not just beating your head against the wall every day. It just seems, it's very frustrating to me. So I can't imagine how it is to actually be a legislator and have to sit in those committee meetings and try to talk common sense. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about, policy questions that you would like to speak to? I know you've got kind of a wide range of platforms, and you have personal background in, I don't know if it's construction or business, but I know you have a specific interest in that.
Well, yeah. So I currently am the controller and CFO for a construction company that does contracting on public transportation projects. I've been doing that for 27 years, so I'm familiar with working with both the state of Oregon and the state of Washington in roads and bridges and work that surrounds basically just any kind of public right of way. So I would be gravitating towards a transportation committee. I'd also be interested in the budgeting of those types of things, and making sure our dollars are getting applied correctly. The crime and homelessness. I have a little bit of a legal background, which we can get into a little bit later. But I believe that crime and homelessness are tied together. Most people who are homeless were probably initially the victims of crime, whether it be through their use of drugs and people kind of maybe getting in circumstance where they felt like they needed to escape or to self-medicate, and so then eventually they became addicted, and so then they got into a cycle where they became the victimizers themselves, in order to support those habits. So I've talked to a number of community leaders who are familiar with the problem. So we need to do two fundamental things. One is we need to give back our law enforcement agencies back the power to actually effectively do their job, and to make sure that people are held accountable. And then we also need to have the resources available for those individuals who really want to make a change in their situation and change the direction of their life. So, but that doesn't happen unless they have that incentive through accountability, and which again is requires having both the law enforcement agencies and the prosecutors who are willing to put teeth into that choice.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know exactly how much I've told you, and I don't really want to get into it tonight, but the homeless stuff has touched our family, and just seeing really how it begins, and how Washington almost, it's hard to say, it's a state that they entice homelessness. There's the whole homeless industrial complex, which is, a money making machine. And, when I saw you in Spokane in, what was it, May, I stayed in downtown Spokane. My family, we used to spend a lot of summers in downtown Spokane, right on the river. And we'd stay for, a week at a time in a hotel right on the river. And, my sister and I would run around downtown. It was totally safe. I took my kids to downtown Spokane not even 10 years ago, and I would let them, walk the street without me. They could go a couple blocks and come back. And I felt fine. When I was there in May, I didn't feel safe in downtown Spokane. I wouldn't stay there again by myself. The homeless situation has gotten out of control.
Oh, clearly. Yeah. I mean, and everyone who's in Spokane is aware of that. And I feel badly for the populace who has to navigate around that, who are scared to take advantages of the amenities that the city offers them. I feel bad for the property owners who have to deal with the vandalism and the crime and the destruction, and the other things that come with homelessness. And I feel bad for the voters and the citizens that voted to have this issue at least addressed as it pertains to schools and daycares, and then had the city say, no, we're not going to actually enforce that. So it's another example of how I believe government's not actually looking to work on behalf of the people. They seem to have an agenda of their own. And you alluded to a little bit to it, the homeless industrial complex. Believe that, I've heard it said, and I believe it, that homelessness should be a temporary condition, not an industry.
Yep. Me too. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you know that you're on our voters recommendation list, and you are highlighted yellow, which because you're an endorsed candidate. I have had a couple people reach out to me about Mike Kelly's past, and I wondered if, and I've been happy to address that with them. And I wondered if, and you and I have talked about this privately, but I wondered if you would be willing to take this opportunity to just share with people a little bit about your past, and how far you've come.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So most of this is on my website because I've been very upfront about it since the beginning of my campaign. Because although it was something that I don't highlight, I do feel like that it was an important part of who I am, because I learned a great deal through the experience. So essentially, the facts are in the 1989, I was arrested for financing narcotics transactions. And, it was the 80s. I was quite young at the time, in my early 20s. And I kind of got drawn into that through a variety of ways. But bottom line is I was eventually incarcerated as a consequence of that initial arrest. And during my time in prison, and this is, again, federal level, I spent my time as wisely as I could. And one of the things that I did was I got into the law library and started studying the law. Mainly initially just to help other people who understand their cases. I have a natural ability for these more complex issues. But it was through that process of helping others that I actually realized that there were some significant mistakes made in my own case. And they're quite simple, but they were, again, significant. And essentially what that meant is that I had been charged with a misdemeanor, but sentenced for a felony. And so that allowed me to go back and petition the court through a process that is allowed in federal law to have my sentence corrected. And that started a process through which discussions with the government, I was able to get a substantial reduction in my sentence. get some other charges dropped altogether that went away. And I was released after a short period of time. Well, short being 6 years. It was much shorter than I would have otherwise been facing. So since that time, I've taken that to as my road to Damascus moment, if you will, kind of my opportunity at redemption, um, and and I've moved forward and had what I consider a very positive experience in the 35 years since that time. One of a couple of things that it did leave me with, though, is an understanding of how the system works. It left me with an appreciation of, just the freedoms that we actually do have, and how important it is to be law-abiding, to be aware and alert of what's going on, and to be engaged. But it also gave me an appreciation for accountability. So while it was not a pleasant experience, I'm actually thankful for it, because I now understand that accountability is the first step in getting your life turned around and to making a change. Because if you're not held accountable, then it's going to be easier to stay in the circumstances you're in than to actually make those difficult changes.
I think that's actually, I love that story, because it's kind of how our system is ultimately designed, right? We want people to go to be accountable for their crimes, and then to turn their lives around, right? To be reformed. And you did that, right? Like, you did what we wish every, criminal, or, somebody who had, broken the law. That's what we want them to do. That's why we have the system. We don't want these repeat offenders. And so I think it's really cool, because you bring a really unique perspective and experience to the office. And it's been, what did you say, like 35 years or something like that. We have to give people a chance for redemption. The Democrats are great at that. They've got Tara Simmons in the House, who is she's a recent convicted felon, I believe. But I mean, they're proud of that, and she's using her experience for a purpose that we don't really like. But I think you have just something really unique to bring to the table. And I personally see that as an asset. I don't see that as a negative thing. You've obviously learned from it and turned your life around, and you've accomplished a lot since that time. And so I hope you're proud of that. But I think that's actually kind of a cool story that, a lot of people would, especially people who are in the law and justice system now, can look to you and go, oh, there's a success story. I can get my act together and actually do something with my life.
Well, thank you, Julie. I appreciate those kind words, and you are correct in my opinion that it is a good example of how the system should work. And I have other people that I'm still in contact today that had that same experience, and they've turned their lives around. And so, when we keep accountability as part of the equation, the system and the process can function as it's intended to, which is to give people the opportunity to make a change if they so desire. But if they don't, then they continue to be held accountable. And so contrary to what some people might think, I am a law and order person. I believe that it's necessary in order for a functioning society and for people, because a society is made up of individuals, for those individuals who make mistakes to turn their life around and get back on track. Fortunately, in this 35 years, I've found that it's not been a big hindrance to me or my success. Many people who find out about my story feel the same way you do, and they're very forgiving, they're very understanding, and they know that all of us have made mistakes, and we all need an opportunity to turn ourselves around in one way or another.
Absolutely. Well, we've got an election in 8 days, next Tuesday, August 6th. Do you have any, obviously we want people to vote for you. Their ballots should be on their countertops or wherever they put their mail, dump their mail. In the last week, ballots were mailed out about a week and a half ago. So you've got your ballot. If you haven't turned it in yet, please fill it out. If you're in the 4th legislative district, please vote for Mike and get that in a ballot drop box tomorrow. I bet you need some money. Every candidate I ever talked to needs donations. So if you guys go to mikeforwa.com, you can send a donation. All of our candidates need money. That's how the game is played. So if you can chip in just $10 or whatever you can, every amount helps. What else can people do to help your campaign, Mike?
Well, you've mentioned the two most important. So donations are important. We still have 8 days left, so we still are doing activity. I'm still knocking on doors every day. We're still making phone calls. We're still putting up signs. And so far here in Spokane County, only about 9% of the ballots have been returned. So the next thing that people can do is beyond voting themselves is to make sure that those they know in their family, their neighbors, anyone that they feel comfortable reaching out to, also vote and participate. If we want our legislators to listen to us, they need to know that we're paying attention. And the best way to do that is to have as many people as we can return those ballots and let them know that they have a voice and they're going to exercise it. So yeah, spreading the word and helping me spread the word through those donations would be most appreciated.
Awesome. And people can reach out to you on your website, mikeforwa.com. And if they want to sign up to help door knock or volunteer with you in some way, they can do that on the website.
Oh, absolutely. Even better would be go to Mike Kelly for Washington. That's Mike Kelly, Kelly for Washington, and that on Facebook, and they can follow me there. That's a free way to show support through the following, and they will also get informed of events and other things that are going on. And they can send a message and say, "Hey, I'd like a sign. I'd like to help doorbell. I'd like to make phone calls and to the voters of Spokane County and encourage them to get their ballots returned." Just however they want to reach out, they can do that through a Facebook page as well.
Yeah. So everybody on Facebook, that's Mike Kelly for Washington on Facebook. And you can also find that on if you're following Conservative Ladies on Facebook, we've shared his page a couple of times. I think I tagged you in the post this morning too. So Mike Kelly for Washington on Facebook, and Mike, you're also on X. I don't know if you know that, but you are Twitter.
And Instagram.
Yes, you're all over. You have a great campaign manager.
I do. I have a great team.
You do have a great team.
Yeah, and some of them belong to the Conservative Ladies of Washington. So I can't say enough good things about my team. Any success that I experience will be because of them.
Well, I think it's awesome. I'm glad you have a great team. I'm really grateful once again that you are running. Are there any last words that you'd like to say to people? We kind of, told them to vote, told them to donate. Anything that I forgot to ask you that you want to mention?
No, I just hope I can convey some of my passion for just our country and our state and our community. I feel like everything is under attack. When I knock on doors, I see a lot of despair. I see a lot of people who don't want to be engaged because it's either painful or they feel like it's a waste of time. But I tell them, I said, look, I've knocked on these doors. I've talked to your neighbors. They feel the same way that you do. And we just have to stay engaged and we have to stay involved and make sure that our voice is heard. And so when I talk to people at the door, especially those that have kind of been, well, if you will, beaten down a little bit by the the years of seeing things just get worse and worse, it really motivates me because they are humble, God-fearing people that just want a voice. They just want to know that someone is listening to them. And so it just motivates me to be that voice, to go to Olympia and stand in front of the legislators, especially those from the other side of the state, and say, look, I've talked to my people. I know what they want. This is not what they want, but here is a solution that they can get behind. Let's discuss this, like adults, rationally, and let's find the best solution that will satisfy the citizens, not some lobbyist, not a legislator's ego, but the citizens, and make sure that their voice is heard and involved in the process.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought that up because people are beaten down, people are discouraged, and they need a fighter. And so I appreciate that you're willing to be that fighter. And Mike, I hope you win the primary And I'd love to do this again before the general when we know, who your opponent is, so that we can, talk directly about their policies versus your policies, and kind of where you both stand on the issues, so that we can really show people the difference of what you would bring to Washington.
Well, thank you, Julie. I greatly appreciate it. And again, I can't thank Conservative Ladies of Washington enough. You do great work, and I'm very proud to know your members, because I see them come to your events and how much effort they put in, and so they're passionate, just like myself. And I didn't give up when the federal government told me I needed to be in prison, and I won't give up when I'm in the legislature, and regardless of who tells me that we don't that they think they know better than us.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us tonight. Everybody get out and vote LD4 Senate Mike Kelly. Have a good evening, everyone.